Good morning. As you already know, it is quite early. But, but, that doesn't mean it's not a good time for a little learning. So, today, we're gonna go over neuroplasticity. It's like your brain and stuff. So to start out, we have neurons. Those are the little dingers in your brain that think about making connections and stuff. And those connections are what, make you perceive reality, or what you believe to be reality from your perceptions, because you're just a bunch of receptors sensing stuff. And neuroplasticity plays into that between your neurons, because they are like little viruses that grow in your brain. But you want to keep them there because they're important, because they literally make your existence happen. And why consciousness does that thing in there as well, I don't know. But on the more animalistic side, things that you do repeatedly, you do more. Okay? And that's why this little these words that have meaning are put together in order to convey that message, that neurons that fire together wire together. This means that whenever you're doing your little thing of thinking, or even doing, or thinking and then doing, you'll do that more often, or you'll be more inclined to, because there's a stronger connection between those neurons, and that means the signal goes faster and stronger to that same thing. That's why we learn, because, I know 1 + 1 = 2, because 1 and 1, and then the sign plus means the addition of them to become 2. But this is so well ingrained in my memory, or in my brain, that I just know it. The same thing with all of your timetables. If you memorize all of those, then you just know it. Then, it's also why you get addicted to stuff, because you see the thing, or you see the environment in which you do the thing, and then you're like, ooh, I could do that thing. And then you go to do that thing. And that's an addiction. Well, only if it's harmful, I guess. It's hard to tell. But, moreover, it's important to know this so that it's either easier to overcome addiction, because you know that it's all about the sensations, and easier to create better habits or environments for yourself, so that you're able to live happier. That's totally a word. And an interesting thing, actually, is that these connections that you're making will actually never go away. And during the Vietnam War, a lot of the soldiers were addicted to heroin on the grounds of Vietnam. And then when they came back to America, or at least whenever they were expecting to come back, America was like, oh no, we're going to have a bunch of heroin addicted soldiers. And so they got a lot of programs to, not make them heroin addicts. But whenever they did come back home, as you could imagine, going from Vietnam to USA is a big difference in environment. And because of that, very few of them continued to be addicted to heroin, because it's all about the cue of, oh, look at that. That reminds me, I should do some heroin. And then you do some heroin. But that's not what you want to do. So if you remove that by moving them to, back to the US of A's instead of the Vietnams, then, well, the cues gone because, well, they're in an entirely new environment. But if you were to say that they went back to Vietnam, they'd probably get a little itching, even like 50 years later, because that neural connection never goes away. It only degrades over time. So it's still slightly there. So if you if you start like smoking, and then you get very heavily into it, like you become a chain smoker, then a lot of environmental cues tell you to smoke. But if you were to change that environment entirely and then stop smoking, because you got over the craving, like physiologically first, and then you got over the reminders that, oh yeah, I like to smoke, then you'll stop smoking. But if you go back to a place in which you heavily smoked, then you'll, well, smoke. You'll at least feel inclined to. That doesn't mean you necessarily will. You'll just feel like, oh, I'm getting a little itching right now. And so it's good to not smoke, I guess. On this point, actually, people like me don't smoke and don't drink and do neither hard drugs or soft drugs. By the way, I just came up with that term, soft drugs. I'm going to be keeping it around, meaning like caffeine or what's another one? Like something that's, I mean, I guess I eat sugars, but like I'm not that crazy, guys. Because freaking plants, or, well, I guess plants have caffeine, but like berries, and those have so much good other stuff compared to like caffeine, which is, I guess, to get my point across, a neurotoxin to bugs, but it gets us a little high, and we love to do it. But I mean, I don't do it because I feel like I don't need to, but there's a good argument to be made that if you feel like you don't need to do something that is at least mildly addictive, then you don't need to do it. But more so onto the drinking and the smoking. Well, humans have been drinking and smoking for centuries. And there's an argument to be made that this is so naturally ingrained in our culture that it's, well, obviously it's normalized, but that it's actually good to do. And I think otherwise, as a non-drinker, non-smoker, nowadays we don't need to be doing that. We can just have forms of play and get in an environment in which people feel like having fun without, drinking poison or smoking poison in order to lower their inhibition levels so that they feel like they can have fun. Because I can just have fun whenever I want, and I don't need to do any drugs to do that. And so I'm not beholden to such cycles. But on the other hand, it's so culturally ingrained that people have to do it. Well, not necessarily have to, but that it's okay for them to do it. And while there's like a lot to say about, what people should be doing, I don't really care what people do. Because, well, they're smoking and drinking, and I don't do that, and I feel like I would never do that. But they're their own people. But it probably wouldn't hurt to maybe tell your kids to understand that you don't have to smoke and drink in order to have fun. But whenever you're a teenager, you're in your group, and then your group begins to smoke and drink, and then you're, well, smoking and drinking because you want to stay in the group. But teach your kids, yo. Neuroplasticity, yo. And drugs and alcohol, yo. Anyways, toodles.